If you think of evil in the world of Pokemon, your mind immediately jumps to members of criminal organizations like Team Rocket, Team Plasma, and Team Flare. But the character with the darkest past is not a criminal, or even a leader of one of these criminal organizations. He's an unsuspecting gym leader who you face early in your journey, and he has a history of violence and darkness that would put even Giovanni to shame. And what makes it even worse is that he never got punished for all the lives that he took. I'm talking about the man we know as Lieutenant Surge. Lieutenant Surge is an electric-type gym leader of Vermilion City in the Kanto region, and you encounter him pretty early in the game. And it seems pretty clear that he was in some sort of war. First of all, his name is Lieutenant Surge, which has to be a military title because no one would name their kid Lieutenant. And he's also known as the Lightning Lieutenant, which is a nickname the soldiers had for him in the military. And to top that off, he confirms it himself when he mentions that electric-type Pokemon saved his life in the war, which means he was 100% involved in direct one-on-one combat. But notice his distinct appearance. Blonde hair, sharp features, large eyes. Lieutenant Surge is clearly depicted to be the typical American soldier, and this is confirmed when you read the sign outside his gym which says, "The Lightning American." But what is an American soldier like Lieutenant Surge doing in the Kanto region? Because we know Kanto is based off of the real-life Kanto region in Japan. Well, let me introduce you to the World War II theory. This theory proposes that the Pokemon world is all based on real-life countries that went to war in an event known as the Great Pokemon War. First, notice that each of the regions literally resembles a country. For example, Kanto is Japan. The Unova region appears to look like New York, so it would be in the United States. The Kalos region looks like France, and so on. So based on this evidence, it suggests that the Pokemon world was at war as well. So the Kanto, Johto, Sinnoh, and Hoenn regions were all part of Imperial Japan, which was fighting the regions of Unova, the US, Alola, the US, Galar, the UK, and Kalos, France. Now so far, everything has been based off the real world, so we can assume the conflict lines up with the real world events as well. Well, in 1941, Japan launches a massive attack on Pearl Harbor, which is a military base located in Hawaii. So interpreting this in Pokemon terms, the first act of war was when the Kanto region attacked the Alola region, and they dropped hundreds of Voltorbs that self-destructed and caused many casualties. And in the real world, America responded by invading the Japanese-controlled islands of Guam, Wake Island, and Okinawa, which are all separate from the mainland. We can take this interpretation to mean that Unova then sent their Pokemon and human army into regions like Johto, Sinnoh, and Hoenn and took them over. And Lieutenant Surge, who was an American commander during the war, would have been at the heart of this battle. And also because this was the only ground fighting in the war, as America never touched the mainland of Japan, so Unova never actually landed in the Kanto region. Therefore, the story of Lieutenant Surge being involved in combat and being saved by electric-type Pokemon could have occurred in one of these regions. But how exactly does an electric-type Pokemon save somebody? It's not like a Chansey or a Blissey, which is known to heal humans. They can't really nurse someone back to health either. So the only way an electric type could save Lieutenant Surge is by whoever was attacking him. And therefore, Lieutenant Surge, even though it was a wartime situation, has definitely taken human lives. Now you might still be able to defend him because it's a war, lives are taken on both sides, but what he does next is truly indefensible. In 1945, America dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which in a single instant wiped out hundreds of thousands of people and eviscerated the cities. There is significant proof that this happened in the world of Pokemon as well. And as the only commander or senior ranking army official seen in the Pokemon world, it is heavily hinted that Lieutenant Surge was involved in the decision to drop the atomic bomb on the Kanto region. And because he's familiar with the region and he's a high-ranking official, he might have even been the one tasked with flying a plane and dropping the bomb, which wiped out so many innocent people. In fact, the story could have gone something like this. It's a cold Friday morning in Castelia City, capital of the Unova region. Lieutenant Surge fires up his plane and ascends to cruising altitude. He is conflicted about his decision, but he knows the military has to do this. After a few hours of flying over the ocean, the horizon turns green as he starts to approach the island of Kanto. It's go time. It's called Lavender City. It's a massive city, which is almost the biggest in Kanto. While the enemy appears and attacks the plane with their flying type Pokemon, Lieutenant Surge, with sweat streaming down his forehead, makes the fateful decision to press the button and release the bomb. But something is clearly wrong. The explosion wiped out Lavender City and hundreds of thousands, so it was successful. But the plane is losing altitude fast. The explosion was so strong that the electrical systems on the plane failed and it's about to crash. At this fateful moment, Lieutenant Surge accepts his fate as the plane's going down, but his Raichu comes out of its Pokeball and delivers a thunder shock so strong that it restores the systems on the plane, and he's able to make it back to Unova and tell the people the story of how this electric type Pokemon saved his life. As for the city, it becomes known as Lavender Town after it's rebuilt, and it's home to thousands of graves and ghost type Pokemon because of all the death and destruction. Now that was a very interesting scenario, but could it have actually happened? Because number one, Lieutenant Surge was definitely in the military, and as a high-ranking officer, he could have been tasked with dropping the bomb. Number two, we have proof that an electric type saved his life because he says so himself. And number three, we have proof that the atomic bomb was used in the world of Pokemon because of Victini. Now, the Pokemon Victini is a mythical Pokemon, and as described in its Pokedex entry, it is known as the Victory Pokemon, and it's described as having the ability to produce limitless energy within its body. Nintendo clearly intends this to be a reference to the atomic bomb because victory means victory in the war, and the limitless energy comes from the atomic bomb. But even if he didn't drop the bomb, as a high-ranking officer, Lieutenant Surge is certainly involved in the operation, whether it be the decision-making process or telling one of his subordinates to drop the bomb. Lieutenant Surge certainly bears responsibility for this war crime. And instead of taking responsibility for that and being held to trial, he's just chilling in Kanto. Wait, this doesn't really make sense. Why would Lieutenant Surge move to the country he was at war with for so long? Because it's originally theorized that he is from Unova. Why would he live in Kanto? Well, you see, he's not doing it out of pleasure. His quote-unquote Pokemon gym is actually a front for a US military base. You see, after the war, the US kept a strong military presence in Japan to help them rebuild the country and prevent any future war or civilian uprising. So Lieutenant Surge's Pokemon gym is just his excuse to stay in the country and monitor what's happening and then report back to the leaders of the Unova region. Also, in Pokemon Heart Gold, you have an opportunity to meet him outside a power plant after you capture Zapdos. And clearly, he's not just a tourist to the power plant. In fact, his presence there suggests that the military of Unova is still controlling the power supply to Kanto to enforce their rule and control the country after they took it over, and they can shut off the electricity at any moment they choose. Lieutenant Surge, therefore, is a complete and utter tool of the Unova military, and he's never faced consequences for his actions in the war. And on top of all that, he lies about his Pokemon gym. This is a clear and shut case. Oh, what's this? You still don't believe me? Well, here's one last piece of evidence. In Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, after arriving at the Magnet train station in Saffron City, he offers you to trade his Pikachu named Volti for the one that you caught. Now, if you place this Pikachu in your party and look at the Pokemon details, you will notice that his Pikachu is from France, which is yet another piece of evidence that he served in Europe during the Great Pokemon War. So I think it's pretty safe to say this gym leader has a darker past than almost any character in the Pokemon universe. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe.